Well, good evening, freedom seekers. This is non-monogamous Mark reporting to you from my girlfriend's apartment in Seattle, Washington, which is also my home where I live and share my time with here and also in California. And so we're coming to you with our weekly report here this week. And I've got a really interesting topic this week, and that's going to be on times of celebration in our lives, or also things that for a non-monogamous person, sharing their life with more than one person can really end up creating a lot of stress and a lot of complication. Now, for many years, I was involved in the Seattle area, the Seattle polyamorous community, and leading discussions to non-monogamous groups of people. And several times a year, we'd end up focusing a discussion around this topic of celebrations, particularly as we would every year go into the holiday period, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that holiday period. Then there's always a focus on this topic, but then also other times of the year, because there's other things that we end up celebrating in our lives besides just holidays. There are special events, like I've been to weddings with my partner Chris, and there's funerals, and there's just those kinds of special events, or it could be a special event for your work, and how do you handle and deal with that situation? And particularly if you're in a situation like I am, where I'm actually literally living in two different states, about 1,000 miles apart, and then certain things come along, like this COVID-19 virus come along, and whereas I totally stopped flying, and that can be a disruption and disturbance as well, and after a while, this can become a very stress-inducing conflict in your non-monogamous life as to how to handle these situations. And so tonight I'm going to be touching on that topic, and I'm going to tell you about how it also then relates to the transitions that I'm going through, which every week I talk about the transition that I'm going through in transitioning in my life not from monogamy to non-monogamy, or even non-monogamy to a more liberated life, because a lot of people live in non-monogamous lives certainly do not live a very liberated life. They live a life of many rules and limitations and restrictions and insecurities, and they try to protect their insecurities, and like when I was married, my wife and I then had a lot of different rules in place to protect our relationship. No, it's not protecting a relationship. It's really protecting your insecurities. And so there's a lot of these kinds of things then that come on, and that people are, when they go to transition, or they're living a non-monogamous life, that they're not necessarily living a liberated life. And the things that I teach and I talk about is about not only living a non-monogamous life, but living a liberated life. Because a liberated life then is a life where you don't have these complications that are created from the things like celebration and holidays and birthdays and anniversaries. So we're going to be talking about that here tonight, and I hope that you look forward to that. And of course, every week during the weekly update, I talk about the things in my own transition and that I'm going through, which is a liberation of my income, and that's what I really talk about each week here. Is where you're needing to liberate yourself sexually, you're needing to liberate yourself in your relationship, or you're needing to liberate yourself in your health, or you're needing to liberate yourself in your income. And so for me, I have done a really good job since first starting to live a non-monogamous life, and then moving in the direction of liberation and liberating myself from in my sex life and in my relationships. And my journey continues on that. But then I also, when that kind of all kind of changed, where I went from living a monogamous life to living an ethically and consensually non-monogamous life, then I started paying more attention to my health, and I realized that I created what most people do: is they create a health dependence situation in their life, and so I don't talk anything on these Monday night videos about really liberating your health, but that's another aspect that we certainly teach on and focus on in helping you to live a life that is liberated. For me, because I wanted to have more sex with more people more often, and since I didn't really get started, I mean, I never had sex with a second woman in my life. I only had sex with one woman in my life until I was 49 years old. And so by the time that I opened up my marriage, and I was old, and then I wanted to really be able to enjoy having sex with lots of women, and I wanted to be able to do that until I was 80, 90, or even 100 years old. Now my goal is to live and be healthy and active and sexy until I'm 110 and 120 years old. And people say, "Oh, I wouldn't want to live that old, be that old." Well, sure you wouldn't if you're decrepit and unhealthy, and your mind and your mental state is not good, or your physical state is not good, or you've got nothing to live for. I mean, I know people that once they retire from their job, that it's like, yeah, they have nothing more to live for. Oh, that's not me. That's not my life. And that's some of the things that I really try to help you with here. And so tonight I'm going to be talking about some of these celebrations, and then also in transition in your life. But before we go there, I've been talking about my bus, my motorhome that's up for sale. Well, I actually accepted an offer today. So I'm going to go ahead and just flip my screen here, and I'm going to actually show you the vehicle that I've enjoyed many years of, and give you a chance to see some of the photos of it. So I'm going to flip the screen and we'll take a look at that. Okay, well, here we are looking at a photo of my 1958 Greyhound bus, better known as a GMC PD 4104. They were a real popular bus in the day. I mean, the GMC 4104 totally monopolized the market, and they came out with the GMC 4104s in 1956. Mine was in 1958, and these buses, they ran on the highways for Greyhound all the way through the 60s and in many cases into the 70s. Mine's a 1958, and it was purchased by the Greyhound franchise organization down in Texas, and then it ran the highways between Texas and Florida. But then, of course, Greyhound retired it, and when they retire these buses, then there's still a lot of good miles on the engine, and the housing itself, the bus is in really great shape. So a lot of people like to go and buy these old buses and convert them into a motorhome. And I have no idea who it was that did the conversion on this bus. I bought it from the second owner of it as an RV, but the first owner then converted it into an RV where they pull out all the seats and they totally redo the interior as like you see here. So we'll just flip through the photos for you real quick, and this is looking from the front of the bus, from basically the not quite at the driver's close to the driver's seat, but the front third of the bus, and looking back to the kitchen and the bathroom and the bedroom. And so then here that is looking from right the entrance right on the back side of the kitchen and looking forward, and where you can see the driver's station up there, the far left, and passenger's chair, lounge chair, and a couch, and table, and another lounge swivel chair, and then the kitchen here. And then here's just a little close-up, more of a close-up photo of the front of the bus, and we'll go through these a little quickly now. And again, looking back, and this is the bus itself. Now, I did not wash it to be able to get it sold or anything, so I kind of wiped it down a little bit, but it needs a good bath, believe me. But so here's what she looks like on the outside, and she's just a pleasure to drive. That's where I've had it stored for the last year. I literally had it parked there and paid the homeowner there a monthly fee for parking it there in that spot. And so then here's, of course, the front door, and looking up is the steps that go up there, and the driver's station, and then coming back here on the left side is the refrigerator, and there's a little like handle thing on the right side before the bed. That's the bathroom there, and then of course that's the bedroom. A full-size refrigerator, nice size fridge, or freezer as well. That's the closet, and it's very unusual for most motorhomes to have this kind of closet space, and that's a nice feature. I lived in this bus. That's a desk back there in the bedroom, and I lived in this bus for about an average of 8 months of the year, where I was on the road traveling, building my business, and was home 1 or 2 days a week, and then on the road for anywhere from 5 to 6 days a week, and sometimes I'd be on the road for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and living out of town, out of the bus, and building my business throughout the Northwest, in Washington and Oregon, Idaho, once in a while a little bit in Montana, and just throughout the Northwest. And so I have a very fond connection. There's looking into the bathroom, where we have, of course, the toilet, and there's also a shower in there, and a bathroom sink and mirror and stuff like that. And so there's the shower, and to the left is the sink. And I really didn't have any more pictures of it because I did not get the bathroom cleaned up very well before, hardly at all, before I took my photos. And these are the photos that I used to sell the bus and list it. I listed it on Craigslist, and then these are the photos I used to sell the bus. And so people would, then see if they're interested, and if they were, then I invited them out to come take a look at the bus, and everybody that took a look at the bus went ahead and made an offer, and they all thought it was really a nice bus and a nice conversion job. And I'm really happy to say then that the person that I ended up selling the bus to, that's the passenger seat there in the very front. The person I ended up selling the bus to, he just really has a strong interest in things from the 1940s and the 1950s. And so he has like restored some old automobiles, and has just done some beautiful work. And so he has some property on an island here in Washington State, and he's going to take that property, and he's going to use his vehicles. Like, he's got this one car he's restored where he's now, it's a 1950 classic, some kind of car, but he's got a bed in it, and so he's taken his passion of old cars and his passion of things in the 1940s and the 1950s, and he is creating an Airbnb on this island. And when he saw the ad for my bus, he just said, "Oh, this would be perfect to go ahead and restore." And so he came out and took a look at it, and he got all excited and wants to totally restore it to like the paint job will be the original colors that Greyhound had it painted to, and all these kinds of things. And I got all the original documentation for the bus, and so he's just the ideal, the perfect person to. I'm thrilled of having him have this The gentleman also has it's a rockabilly, he calls it the rockabilly band, and kind of music from the 40s and 50s, and they just rockabilly and travel around. And he says this will become our traveling tour bus when we're on the road as well. And so it's going to have multiple functions. One, being on the road, and then two, being in his Airbnb. It's going to be the focal point of his whole Airbnb. And of course, when he's on the road with his band, then he'll also be promoting his Airbnb with using the bus. It's going to be a focal point. And so we came out and took a look at it, and the bus, I mean, it looks nice, but for what he wants, he really wants it in pristine condition. And so and the kind of restoration work that he does is just, what I saw him do on, he's also got 2 old trailers that he's really restored and just made it look really beautiful. And so he does wonderful work. And so, there's going to be a lot of work involved for him with this old bus. And so, and he might end up needing some parts. And, in some cases, it's called the skin, which is the siding of the bus. It's got some dings in it and dents, and it's not perfect. Well, and you can replace those panels. There's a company in Florida that still makes those panels, because it's just a whole bunch of panels that are riveted on the side of the bus. And there's a company in Florida still making panels for these old buses, the 4104s. And so he thought, well, I can always order panels from there. But also one of there's 2 front windshields, a right and then a left side. The right side has got a crack or break in it. And so he wants to replace that. And so he was talking to a neighbor of his on the island where he lives. And the island is called Whidbey Island. It's a large island here in Washington State. And Whidbey, Whidbey Island. And so he was talking to a neighbor of his, and his neighbor says, well, there's a big yard in Freeland about 10 miles from here that has 2 of these old buses, I think. And so he went out and looked, and they're the 4104, the exact bus. It was like amazing. One had caught fire, so it was all burned out on the inside. However, the windshield, the right and left windshield, are in perfect shape, and all the windows all the way around the bus are in perfect shape, and the skins are all in perfect shape. And so he was able to negotiate a really good deal in buying that, so that any of the outer skin pieces that he wants to replace on my bus, the windshield he wants to replace, he's got all of those parts to do that with. And so it's just like amazing find. I think he said then the other bus, it had some, the burnt out bus also had a good motor, a newer motor than my bus has I think it's called this 6. My mind's not bringing it to mind, but it's basically it's an old 6-cylinder flathead diesel motor, 671 Detroit diesel. They're still used in ships today, ocean-going ships, because they're such a dependable piece of engineering. And they're not fast, they're not real powerful, but they just keep going. And so that's called a 671 Detroit diesel, the engine. And so a lot of the people with these old buses, though, they want a little more power in them. And I mean, going over mountain passes, I've been over many mountain passes with the bus. Been all over the Northwest and took vacations to Palm Springs in the bus, and just drove it down to California. But you're going to basically be looking at going over a mountain pass 30 to 35 miles an hour on the average. And so a lot of people like to put a new powertrain in them. Well, one of these buses that he located and found there on Whidbey Island, just been sitting there for years in this yard, or it's, I guess, a big old, just like a junkyard, essentially. Well, it's got a perfectly good engine, but it's also an upgraded engine. And so it's got more power, it's more modern. So he'll be able to take and put that engine into my bus as well, and that'll give it a little better power. And so I'm just really thrilled. I had 4 people that made me an offer on the bus, and he wasn't the most money. In fact, I took $4,000 less by choosing him. and although he did offer me more than what my asking price was on the ad, but I told everybody that chances are the selling price is going to be more than the asking price, because with multiple people being interested, I only give them one opportunity to make their best bid and their best offer. So, they don't, no dickering, just take your best shot. You got one shot. And so then he took his best shot, and others did as well. And yes, I really wanted to have him have the bus, and he did. His best shot was more than my asking price, and was $4,000 less than the top bid for my bus. And I really wanted him to be the owner, so I went ahead and made that decision today and called him just a couple hours ago. And so really excited about that. So let's get on with the topic today, though, of celebrations. And thank you for allowing me to show part of my life, what's been just a joy. Every time you stop somewhere on that bus, people will come around and gather around, and because it's just such a classic, and they just want to ask about it, and they want to know about it and see it, and it's just been a real joy of mine. Unfortunately, I haven't actually had it on the road for the last 10 years, and it's kind of sad to part with it, because, like I've mentioned before, because of the auto accident that I was in a number of years ago, I got some shoulder damage, and I can't drive. The bus does not have power steering. I can drive at short distances, but long distances, I just would not be able to physically. Like if when I go to Palm Springs, I would drive the bus for 3 days in a row, long days, and there's no way I could do that. And so I felt that it's particularly up to pain month after month to keep it stored, and it was just time to let it go. And I'm just very excited to have found the new owner. And so let's go ahead and then again let's switch screens here a little bit and go to my screen that I'm going to share and about the weekly report. And so I'll go there now, and we'll get going on that, but get talking about our topic and everything as well. And so this is my weekly wrap-up video report, as if you've been here with me before. And one of the things that my emphasis is helping you to transform your life and transition it so that you can live a life that is thriving and ethical and consensual non-monogamous life, but it's a life that you create and a life that you love the most. And being ethically and consensually non-monogamous, I really want to help you to have more sex with more people and more often. And for many years, I not only was involved in discussions, but I led the largest ongoing monthly. I had a discussion group that I led for about a year and a half, and it was the largest ongoing monthly event for the poly community in all of the whole Seattle area. And so I built that up to be a very successful event. And I had led discussions before I started that, because I had a facility that was offered to me and to do these monthly discussions in, and I thought it was a great opportunity for me. And so I went ahead and started to have a monthly discussion at that facility, and then they lost their lease, and so I had to discontinue my monthly program. But it was the largest non-monogamous or poly event in the Seattle area. There may have been some like swingers clubs that have a larger event or something like that, but this is a non-sex event. And although we did have sex at the end of the event, if anybody wanted to use any of the play space that was available to us, they could go and do that. But it wasn't promoted for that. Just that was just an added benefit for those who came to the discussion. If they wanted to then go off and spend a couple hours having sex, then they could do that after our discussion ended every night at 9:30. And so I really, a lot of people get involved in non-monogamy, and they'll have, like be in a relationship with 2 people or 3 people, but then they kind of just they start to minimize because we're so mentally accustomed to our monogamous culture and our monogamous ways that they start to kind of minimize their relationship and the amount of sex and the amount of love they want. And so here what I do is my focus is in helping people to have more sex with more people more often. And that's what I would love to help you to do as well. So I want to help you to transform your life and move in that direction. And the idea is to help you to increase the satisfaction and pleasure that you have in your magnetic life. And then how you do that is by liberating your life to create the magnetic life that you love the most. And so here tonight then for our weekly wrap-up report, then we're talking about then reframing. I introduced this concept before, but we're going to talk about doing some reframing tonight, and that is where the reframing is you gather information that stretches and exercises your mental and emotional models so that you really have things to really think about and ponder, and then you move to the transformation phase where you reframe and then you transform your life. And the transformation phase is where you take and put some action behind the reframing you did mentally. And so with the reframing, then we're talking about the celebrations, the holidays, the special events, and the vacations that we can end up having some real stress over in living a non-monogamous life, because who are you going to spend that celebration with? You know, you got a special celebration of some form. It could be many different kinds. You know, who are you going to spend that celebration with when you have multiple relationships? You know, I remember one woman hearing her talk about how she had been married for quite some time, and she's a sex therapist, in fact, and she had been married for quite some time, and she and her husband had a non-open relationship, non-monogamous, and the real telltale sign for her came when her husband had a celebration come along, and he wanted to go and share that celebration with his girlfriend, and that was the first sign that kind of tipped her hat to the fact that our marriage may be coming to an end. That wasn't what ended their marriage, but that was the first solid evidence of their lives going in different directions. You know, and that's one of the things too, that monogamy teaches us, where you get in a relationship and it's for the rest of your life, you know, and that is just the total opposite that we teach in our ethical, consensual, non-monogamous life. And that if it lasts for the rest of your life, great, but you don't want to have those kinds of attachments in your relationship, and you want to have the ability to change course in your life and go a different direction. You know, I mean, can you imagine back in high school or college, you get out of school and you go to work full time, and then that's the one and only job you have for the rest of your life, and you're stuck in that job, even if you're not thriving. And that's not to say that you're not doing well. You might be doing well in your job, but you're just not thriving. You're not passionate. You're not inspired. And that's so often what happens in relationships, though, in particular monogamous relationships, but it also happens in non-monogamous relationships. And that's where we teach this concept and help you to liberate your life so that you don't have those same experiences. And so when it comes to holidays or celebrations and holidays, special events, you know, like I mentioned, that, you know, funerals and weddings to go to of friends and relatives and things of that nature, you know, these special events, these are important to people. But the thing is, and also then, what about vacation? You know, who are you going to go on vacation with, and how are your other partners going to feel about that? And so I'm going to just share a couple personal experiences that I have with this to kind of help you to understand some of the stresses that can take place. And going back to holidays, my favorite holiday of the year is Thanksgiving. Because I just feel like I have, even if I've had just a really terrible year, the year that I lost, for instance, $3 million in business and went broke, you know, I mean, I still had so much to be thankful for, because I was still healthy and I just had so many things that I still could focus on enjoying in my life. I still had, a roof over my head, and was eating. I wasn't starving like people around the world are starving and living homeless in camps and stuff. Didn't have any of that. Even though I'd lost $3 million and went broke, and yet I still had so much to be thankful for. So Thanksgiving has been always my favorite holiday, and I started way back in college, because in college it was where I took 4-day weekend: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I didn't do any studying during that time, 4 days. I always took that 4-day weekend to celebrate 4 days for Thanksgiving, my Thanksgiving holiday. But then, time comes along and I'm in my ethical and consensual non-monogamous life, and then I've got two partners. And those two partners, I'm spending half my time with Chris, that was living with me at the time in my house in Seattle. Now I live with her in her apartment in Seattle. And then I'd spend half the time with my partner Kathy in her apartment in Seattle as well. And the holiday came, and I decided, it's like, yeah, they both want to spend this special holiday with me, and I get that and I understand that. And I decided to go ahead and split my holiday. I spent 2 days with one partner and 2 days with another partner. And it was really, for me, just for me, it was the worst Thanksgiving that I can remember having, because along with that, I carried a lot of stress, and that's all what I created. It wasn't anything that Chris created. It wasn't anything that Kat or Kathy created. It was what I created. And you see, that's where I started having to really think about how to handle these situations, because I had already, been in my non-monogamous life for quite a few years, and I had led these discussion groups and had a lot of people that share their knowledge and experience and how they have handled these situations in their lives. And so after having done all that, here I found myself in this place where my favorite holiday of the year just really wasn't a very good holiday. And so that became a place where I knew that somehow I had to make some changes, and so that I'd be in the future always enjoying the holiday. And then other times with vacations, there have been times where like Chris has a really good income, and Chris and I would go on vacations, or even before that, when I was married, and my wife, and I had a travel business, and my wife, one of the rules that we had is she always got the first dibs on any vacation, because in the travel business, we had lots of offers made to us for wonderful, amazing vacation experiences. We always had to buy airplane tickets to get somewhere and go somewhere to take and enjoy those vacations. But we had wonderful, wonderful offers brought to us, more than we could ever go on. And so, to start out with, then Lisa, my wife, she's got this rule, or I've got this agreement with her, that she gets first dibs on vacations. And so with Chris, then, he'd see me going on these trips and everything, and I'm sure that there was some difficulties that she had with times with that. And then another time where I was then offered a cruise out of Seattle. It was just a one-night cruise, and then I was in a tough spot. Who am I going to now take on this cruise? And one of the girlfriends that I had at the time had never been on a cruise before, and it was just a one-night cruise, and Chris had been on a cruise, and my wife had been on a cruise, and I decided to go ahead, and I can't remember if my wife was still around at that time or not, but she was. Chris was over in the living room, said she was, but I went ahead and I decided that I wanted to go on this cruise, then one night cruise, leaving out of Seattle, and I wanted to go with this girlfriend, and so I did, and I'm sure that created some angst with people as well. and so, vacations now. Like I said, then Kristen's got a good income, and we've had some really nice vacations together. And there have been times, because the money that I have, that Kat and I would spend on vacations really was very minimal. And there was times then that Chris and I would go on vacation, and Kat would just have to take a big swallow and gulp, and that's just some of the difficulties and the challenges around these kinds of issues. And for the person like myself, I'm kind of caught in the middle. And I mean, both my partners, my 2 or 3 or however many partners I had at the time, they all have their own levels of anxiety and stress to deal with all of these issues. And for me, then I carry that burden of what each of my partners is going through and dealing with themselves, and I take it personally and put it on myself. And so the thing is that we really do create our own reality. And we can create a life that is an ethical and consensual non-monogamous life that is complicated, that is full of stress and anxiety around these issues, or we can decide that we're not going to play that game. You see, because that's the game that monogamy gets into playing, and that's where you have possessiveness, and you have you create these guidelines around insecurities and all these different issues that I just started to have to rethink all this, and I realized that even in people's lives that are living ethical and consensual non-monogamous lives, they're not living a liberated life. Just like many people that are living an ethically and consensually non-monogamous life live a sex-positive life, but they don't live a sexually liberated life. There's a big difference, and I've made a video on that. So go ahead and check out that video if you haven't seen that one already. But yeah, there's a big difference between sexually liberated and sex-positive. And until you start to experience that liberation, then you're in dependency and you're in bondage, and the structure that is really more like monogamy than non-monogamy. And we really want to help you to totally enjoy creating a life that you love the most. And so I want you to enjoy being a non-monogamous person, not have to go through all the stresses and issues and strains and complications. Because again, remember, you create all that. And that's a number of my times in my own non-monogamous experience. I had to come down and understand that, yes, I create that. And that's the same thing that goes on with me in my business. You see, if I, like when I lost $3 million, yes, it wasn't my fault. The state of Washington changed a regulation and I couldn't comply with it. They sent a team into my office for 3 days of experts to find a way for them to comply, for me to be able to comply with the new regulations. And I found myself then, after 20 years of sinking my life into this business, of having to go out of business. We're in the middle of or actually the beginning of a recession. And so I ended up selling my assets to cover just cover some of my bills for a nickel on the dollar. And I went broke. And so that I could sit there and say, well, it's not my fault, And so there are things that are outside of your control. You can't do anything about, but it's how you respond to those things. Like you can't do anything about the person you're driving down the freeway and the person that cuts in front of you. You can't do anything about that or that person, but you can certainly do a lot about yourself. How are you going to respond to that? You can respond to that in a really negative energy way, and flip the person off and yell and scream and get mad, honk the horn and all kinds of things. Or you can take a position of saying, oh, that person made a mistake. I'm not perfect myself. I've made mistakes in driving myself, and I'm so glad that other people were understanding and forgiving of my mistakes. And then you, with that kind of an attitude, then you take control of your own response to that situation, and realize then that you're just, yeah, I'm really thankful that I was able to be the person that person cut in front of, because I'm not gonna be honking my horn and getting all negative. I'm not gonna be going on any vengeance, trying to run him off the road or all these kinds of crazy things. But you can go about and make sure that people are on the road, and everybody's looking out for everybody else's safety. And so that's where, when you start to take your power back instead of giving it away. That's what we do so often. When that Thanksgiving that I spent where I wasn't happy Thanksgiving for myself, I had given my power away by putting more of my energy in wanting to try to do something that's going to make both of my partners happy. And I was giving my power away instead of just being selfish. And it's not bad to be selfish. I know we're taught in our society and our culture that selfishness is bad, but it really is not. In fact, there's not many things that have ever been invented that weren't invented for selfish purposes. Going all the way back to when the cavemen started making fires. They made fires for selfish purposes. And we've advanced that to many, many places where we got warm heated homes. Well, isn't that selfish? No, well, yes, it is. It's okay to be selfish. We go to work in our jobs. For those of you that go to work in jobs, you do that because you want the paycheck. You don't do that out of just a love for the job or love for the company. You may love your work and love your job, and you may love the company or love the people you work for, but you go to work. I mean, why don't you show up for work on weekends and holidays when you're not needing to? You can do that. Well, probably a lot of companies wouldn't like to do that because the laws are against that. And and so anyway, that you go to work for selfish reasons, and selfishness does not need to be a bad thing. And so with that holiday, the Thanksgiving holiday, I thought through all that, and I realized that I need to have when you live a non-monogamous life. One of the big differences is you go from monogamy, where when you get into a monogamous relationship, the I and the me is subservient to the we and the us. It's the we and the us in that monogamous relationship that takes priority over the I and the me. Well, the thing that I'm trying to get through in a lot of my teaching now is that in our ethical and consensual non-monogamous lives, the I and the me needs to stay above any we and us. And yes, and that's where be selfish. I mean, isn't that why you're non-monogamous and why you want to have more sex with more people more often? It's a selfish act. I want the satisfaction and pleasure that having more sex with more people more often gives me. That's selfish. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, why do so many people get married? In a monogamous sense, for selfish reasons. It's not because, I'm just going to give my whole life to that person. It's because it's a mutual exchange that goes on, but it's a mutual exchange for selfish reasons. And so that's then with that Thanksgiving holiday, I realized that yes, I needed to be selfish. And so the same thing with then special events and celebrations and vacations. Yes, part of selfishness then is also saying I want to have the satisfaction and pleasure of knowing that I'm a good partner to my girlfriends, And when I was married, I'm a good partner to my wife. And so that's part of my satisfaction and pleasure that I personally get. I don't want to be a good boyfriend for Chris for her benefit, or I don't want to be a good boyfriend for Kat for her benefit. I want to be a good boyfriend for my own satisfaction and the pleasure that I get out of knowing that I'm contributing and giving to their life in a positive way. And that's really what relationships has got to be about. And so, that with this idea of celebrations, holidays, special events, and vacations, I want to help you to reframe this a little bit from what we know from our monogamous culture and start to think about it from a non-monogamous standpoint. And that is, first tip is to be selfish. And then next tip beyond that, though, is you've got to communicate very well, too. You see, where I communicate now with both my partners about these things is that I'm going to really be selfish and make my choices for what's going to increase my satisfaction and pleasure. And that's what every individual, this is where the I and the me becomes above the we and the us. Where if you put the we and the us above I and me, then you're going to be sacrificing your own satisfaction and pleasure. And then you end up in a situation like my old grandpa. He's deceased now, but up till the day my grandma died, as long as I knew him, he drank a case of beer, 2 12-packs, a case of beer a day. And I just thought he was just, drank a lot of beer. He was a functional drunk is what he was. And he went to work every day and he drove his car that way. And he knew he had drank too much sometimes when he drove and all that kind of stuff. I mean, way beyond the legal limit, that's for sure. And he went to work at Boeing, worked on those airplanes that we all fly in. And the day my grandma died, he stopped drinking. He didn't drink for a couple months. And then when he started to drink again, he would drink 2 beers at the most in a day. 2 beers. And I then looked over him every day for the last 10 days of his life because he didn't know how to write a check when grandma died because he had never written a check in his whole life. There are a lot of things that he didn't do so well on his own. And so I kind of helped to look over him a little bit. I lived right next door. I had bought the property that my grandparents owned and developed it and put a home on it and so forth. And so I lived right next door to my grandparents, and so I looked after him. And but he had become a drunk because of these kinds of situations where you put the I below, underneath the we and the us. He'd also become a very bitter man. And his favorite place was his backyard, or if the weather was really bad, then he'd be in the back room of his garage. And he'd just always be cussing under his breath and just very bitter, negative personality. But that's what happens as we get older and older and older. We have to suppress and deny ourselves, where then we put the we and the us, or put someone else above yourself. And so, both my partners know that in my life, I'm going to put myself above the we and the us. And if there are things then that just really end up not working out for them, then, I'm not trying to just stick it to them, but I'm going to make sure that I am living a life that is full of satisfaction and pleasure. It's the only life that I get right now. And so why do I want to take and make choices in my life that aren't going to be satisfying and aren't going to be pleasurable? And I didn't become non-monogamous 13 years ago to start making choices that aren't satisfying and aren't pleasurable. And so I make sure that today that my choices are indeed satisfying to me and pleasurable to me. And so that's the kind of the litmus test, is that, ask yourself, is this satisfying and pleasurable for me? If it's not, then why? What am I doing this? Oh, I'm doing it for that person, not because I really want to. It's kind of like I just kind of feel this obligation to. I've been there, in my non-monogamous life where I feel these obligations. When I first got in my relationship with Kat, and I had learned when I first started, before I became non-monogamous, my wife and I spent that 2 years that I've talked about before in transitioning our relationship from monogamy to non-monogamy. And I remember a very impactful conversation I had with a gentleman, a married guy. He had multiple girlfriends though, and he was married. And I said, well, how do you handle the communication? Do you like talk with them very often? He says, oh, I'm a good boyfriend. I make sure that I have communication with each one of my partners every day. Okay, Mark, make a mental note of that. Be a good boyfriend and have communication with each of your partners every day. But you see, after a while, that got to where it became like I was obligating myself to have communication when I'm with one of my partners, one of my girlfriends, or maybe it was just a one night stand I'm with. But I've got this obligation that I've got to have communication with my partners. And that takes away from not only my satisfaction and pleasure, it takes away from the satisfaction and the pleasure of the person that I am with at that time. And it took me a long time to learn this lesson, and I finally had to start just tell both Kat and Chris, when I am with someone else, I am not going to try to have constant communication with you, or not constant, but daily communication with you, because that is the pattern that I created and I had set up because I wanted to be a good boyfriend. It wasn't a pattern that worked. And when you can imagine, if you want, more sex with more people more often, but then you've got to disrupt that in order to have this communication every day with every one of the people that you have in your life. It just doesn't work. And I remember it came back to my memory, a girlfriend that I had, my first girlfriend. Yes, my first girlfriend. And she really instilled upon me. She wanted me. She was a married woman, and she actually, I met her because she was looking for a girlfriend for her husband, and that's just how I ended up meeting her. I wasn't, her girlfriend, her husband's girlfriend by certain any means, but she was this really Yahoo group where she was looking for a girlfriend for her husband, and I was in that group and having conversations with people, and she came and asked me a question one day and struck up a conversation with me, and before we knew it, we're in a relationship together. And she then told me, she says, Mark, because again, she was my first girlfriend, and the second woman I'd ever had sex with, my wife being the first, and then I had sex with a woman, and then she was the third woman that I'd ever had sex with. And she said to me one time, Mark, I see you as having a harem of women that you are enjoying your new freedom and sexuality with. I really see you having a harem. And I had never really thought about that before. And I had conversations with her about that. And she says, well, yeah, your life is like a watering pot. These pots that you use at home to water your house plants? And says, when your life is like that, and when you're over with one partner, then you're like pouring your water onto that partner, onto that plant. And that partner, that plant is getting all of your water at that time. And then, you stop pouring the water and then you go over to the next plant. And then you pour the water on that plant and it's getting all the water at that time. And that came, I at the time, that conversation I had with her, it really didn't resonate much with me. But it came back years later with me, and I says, yeah, that's the answer here. I'm like when I'm with Chris, I really want to focus my time being with Chris and enjoying my time with Chris. I want to have satisfaction and pleasure from the time that I spend with Chris. And when I'm with Kat, then I want to have satisfaction and pleasure that I want to spend time with Kat. If I'm with anybody else, I want to have satisfaction and pleasure for that time And I don't want to end up feeling like I've got to be a good boyfriend, so I've got to go ahead and call these people and or text them or email them or have daily communication with them. Yes, I like when I'm in California, I still have weekly communication with Chris. Just like now when I'm in Seattle, I have weekly communication with Kat. But it's not daily, and I don't feel like I have to do it because I'm obligated. I do it then because it's a conversation I want to, and I enjoy. You know, when I'm like, because I'm just recently in Seattle, and I spent, last 6 months in California. I'd never spent that much time away from Chris before, but when I would go and I'd call Chris, we'd have really wonderful conversations, and I enjoyed those conversations with her instead of, well, when I was back in the day where I was trying to be a good boyfriend and have daily conversation, it wasn't as enjoyable, and it was shorter conversation and didn't flow, because I was doing it out of obligation, really. Even though it was my own obligation, I created it, but I was doing it out of my own obligation. And so I have a note here about creating an elf life. An elf life. This is a life that actually my mentor has been helping me to create an elf life in my business, and that's easy, lucrative, and fun. And I think that's a good way for you to create your life as well, and me to create my life in terms of non-monogamy. Easy, lucrative, meaning lucrative. I have an abundance of partners. I'm having more sex with more people more often than any time in my life. So lucrative, easy, lucrative, and fun. Have fun. That's so important. And so now that all really does relate to business and what the transition that I'm going through. So let's go ahead and move on to the weekly report here. And before I go there, let me just come back and check the time here. Okay, so we're going to zoom through this a little bit because it's just my way of being accountable to you. I'm also accountable to my coach, in that I have my mentor, Chris. He's in Australia. My coach is Hannah, who is in Germany. And that's one of my coaches. I have several coaches, but that's the coach that I am personally accountable for keeping my my needle moving forward to reaching my goals every week and every month and every quarter, so that by the end of the year I look back and I say, yeah, I'm really excited about the things that I accomplished. And so I continue to, with my coach, I continue to develop this process that I've been teaching you now for the weeks that I've been doing this video. And so you'll see some new things in here, and I'm going over. I'm kind of getting late and going over time, and so I'm not going to go really into talking about the new things. I'll do that in another week, but I do want to go through and do the weekly report, and that's really where it's just a pass and fail. And then I'll tell you what I'm committing to next week and stuff. But so last week, then to start out with, my overriding desire, we cover this every week, is to create an ongoing passive income of $5,000 per month. And that's a small step, and that you don't want your overriding desire. My overriding desire is to be a millionaire. And my overriding desire is to make $20,000 a month of spendable money in my pocket. And so I've got a lot of great big desires, but you want to bring it down. Your overriding desire is, what is your next real big step? Certainly, even like my next big step is to make $1,000 a month of passive income online. But my overriding desire right now is shooting for a $5,000 a month of online passive income that's ongoing, sustainable. And the next thing is to create an online non-monogamous lifestyles academy. And that academy has been created. We don't really promote it yet at this point because we're still organizing it, but it is available online. And I'm not going to, but when we're ready to really take and tell you more about that, but we're working on those details every week and creating an online non-monogamous academy. And it's something we're really excited about, to be able to take and offer you all the help and assistance you'll be able to take and earn, have a certification program. You'll be able to take one course at a time if you want, but you'll be able to have a whole certification program that'll meet your needs. Maybe your needs is transitioning your relationship from monogamy to non-monogamy. There'll be a certification program for that. And then there'll be a certification program for moving from a non-monogamous life, whether it be polyamory or swinging or some combination or open relationship or whatever you want to, however you want to create that. And but to then living and moving forward to creating a life that is totally liberated. And that'll be a life that's liberated in your sex and your relationship. And then from there, then creating a life that's liberated in your health, and also a life that is liberated financially. And so we're going to have certificates and courses you can have for all of this kind of stuff. And yeah, it's a long-term project. It's going to take us a lot to really create this and develop this, but it's kind of like that's one of my big passions. And so then let's go ahead and talk about then what my focus was this week. And this is the things then that I committed to last week. And so the focus for my work in wealth was to show the bus and find a buyer for it. And I showed the bus and found a buyer, accepted an offer today. So I'm really excited about that. List my coffee roaster, grinder, and equipment for sale. I've been storing things in that bus for the past year since we had, for the last year. Well, I stored it at Chris's apartment for a while, but it was like I was taking up too much space here. And so I really wanted to get it out of her way. And I went and I moved it all over to the bus. And because I had this bus that's sitting there empty, why not store it there? But now that I sold that bus, tomorrow I got to go and clear all that stuff out. And then I have a commercial coffee grinder and a roaster, because I roasted coffee commercially. And I've got a commercial coffee grinder, and I've got other equipment that's stored in that bus, and I'm going to go ahead and list it all for sale. I have tubs of stuff in that bus as well, and like tools and electronic stuff and wiring and just all kinds of stuff that I just wasn't ready to just get rid of, and I need to sort through these tubs, and that takes some time. And so that's one of the things. Then working. This is where I can give you a pass or a fail, and so show the bus to find a buyer for it. I give myself a pass. My listing the coffee roaster, the grinder, and the equipment for sale, fail. Did not get that done last week, so it goes on to this week's list. Sort and empty one tub stored in the bus. I give myself a pass on that. Continue to build my online store, thehomnudist.com. I give a pass on that. Week 9 of 12 of my Magnetic Mind certification training. I give myself a failure on that. Out there, I tried to access the internet. Sometimes out there, I was camping last week at a nude camping club, and sometimes I was able to go over to the building and get a good internet connection, and other times I was not. And so I was not able to do the training. It's recorded, so I'll be able to go back and pick that up. But I usually like to attend the live trainings. It's my mentor, Chris, in Australia, that puts them on. And so I got to pick that back up and make that up, essentially. I give myself a fail. Find lost tabs in Chrome history. And so I did not do that last week. Give myself another fail on that. Open documents closed when the computer shut down. Give myself a fail. Do my lenses every day. I give myself a pass on that. And that's a process that we use in our coaching that gives some of the structure that I'm showing you here, and what we teach our the people that we work in with our coaching. Where I'm learning to get better and better at this, in how it structures my life, and then we help the people that are paying for our coaching programs, that we help them then to structure their life as well with it. My sex and relationships, my objective for that is to enjoy being on a camping vacation at a nudist club with Chris, my Seattle girlfriend. And I give myself a pass. In fact, she said just a little bit ago, she gave me was that an A+ for sex last week? Yeah. She got an A+ for sex last week. And so then health and wellness was to meditate daily. I give myself a pass for that. Going on 4 walks, I give myself a fail for that. I went on some walks, but I don't think I quite got to 4. That's something I try to just do every week. I went on a 4-mile walk today, in fact. And so take an allergy cocktail daily. I did not give myself a pass on that because after we got back from our camping trip, I think I missed a day, and so I'll give myself a fail on that. Do 1 recode, and you know, it's like that. What the intention on that is that Chris, my mentor, does weekly recodes online through the internet, and I really like to try to catch one of his recodes every week, and I did not catch a recode last week, and I can always do recorded recode sessions, but and a recode is where it's a process that we use, and Chris has pioneered, where we help you to rewire your brain activity and and just rewire the things that you're wanting to rewire so that you can move forward better with the things in your life that you're working on. And so, yeah, I give myself a failure on that. I did not do a recode last week. So then moving on to accomplishments, what moved my needle forward? I had 4 offers on the sale of my bus motorhome, and of course, I accepted one of those offers. My first recode on myself. I did a recode on myself last week that was just really amazing. I'd never done a recode on myself. I practiced doing recodes with other people and doing them, but I've never done a recode on myself. And that's really the true objective of some of the stuff that I'm learning, is to be able to do it first on myself and then also on others. But one of the people that was interested in buying my bus, he had a business and a house and a wife and a life in Paradise, California. I think it's called Paradise, California. But a couple of years ago, there was one road in and out of town of that town, and there's nothing because it's kind of in a valley and only one road going through there. And a couple of years ago, fire came through, and hundreds of people lost their lives, burned to death. He had left that morning to go get some supplies in the big city for his business, and he had a store in town. And when he went to come back, the state patrol stopped him and would not let him back because the fires were taking over the town. And he fought to try to get in to, save his wife or help his wife or whatever. And he couldn't. They literally handcuffed him to keep him from going in. And then a couple of days later, when they finally were able to go in, his business was burned to the ground, his home was burned to the ground, and his wife was there in the driveway in her car and burned. And I read, he sent me the story about that, and he's interested in buying my bus because, and he said, I want you to know the story. The dream of me and my wife was to travel the USA in a motorhome, and you could make my dream come true. And I appreciate the opportunity for that. And he did not end up making an offer on the bus, and he didn't end up seeing the bus, but he initial contacting me and so forth. He wanted to tell me his story. I read his story like at 8 o'clock at night when we were camping last week, and I went to bed that night at 9 o'clock, and I just couldn't get out of my mind this visual image of his wife in the car in the driveway, and I was really disturbed by that. And I said to myself, okay, I need to recode this. Because the recoding goes back in your memories, that things that you have in your memories, and it takes the emotion out of it. You don't forget your memories. You still have the memories, but it takes the emotional connections out away from their memories when you recode a specific thing. And so I did a recode for myself that night on that because I wasn't going to be able to sleep very well with that image in my mind. And so I did myself a recode where you go in. We have 3 memories in our lives. Memories 1, 2, and 3 is what we refer to them. And I just went in and tapped into those memory structures and rewired my brain waves through those memory structures. And so that was the first time I'd ever done a recode of myself, and it worked. As soon as I got done with that recode, I had no problem sleeping very well that night, and it was just a wonderful experience to have. And so I did my first recode on myself. I wrote up last week. I wrote up a model plan for the ECNM Financial Liberation Club and joint venture, and I'll be telling you more about this in weeks to come. But that was just a very exciting thing to have gotten accomplished last week. And I had an awesome week, just enjoying being naked at the nude camping or nudist club, and they had camping at the nudist club, and being with my girlfriend Chris, and just had an awesome week. And so felt good about that accomplishment as well. Bottlenecks, breakdowns, and breakthroughs. And one of the things that we all have in our lives, we have different parts. You know, I'm a different person because it's a different part of me when I'm with Chris, because she's monogamous with me, than I am when I'm with Kat, and I live more of my non-monogamous self. And I'm a different part with you here making this video, and than I am in my private life a lot of times. And so we all have many different parts of ourselves, and sometimes these parts are conflicting. You know, for instance, somebody may have a part that is, on one hand, is kind of like, I just want to be lazy. On the other hand, I also want to achieve my goals. And those are conflicting parts. And so last week, I had one of my conflicting parts is my adult, what I call my adult achievement self. And then another conflicting part, which I call my child fun DDD self. DDD. Not dyslexia, but ADT. Excuse me, ADD. Adult deficit disorder, attention deficit disorder. So I'm an ADD person, and that ADD person in me doesn't want to really focus on getting work done and getting achievements done. You know, that's the adult stuff. And my ADD self is my child self, because I never had a childhood. It was taken away from me at the age of 5, and I was made the adult, the man of the house at the age of 5. And so I never had a childhood. So now as an adult, my ADD self wants to just have fun and wants to be distracted and wants to be making friends and being social and having a good time. And so these two parts are in conflict with each other. And so last week I went through a process, and one of the processes, again, I learned from Chris, my mentor, not my mentor, well, yeah, my mentor, Chris, my mentor, my coach is Hannah in Germany. But my mentor, Chris, taught me this process called integrating your conflicted parts. And I went through a process in last week and got those two conflicted parts integrated so they're both on the same page. And it was a pretty cool process that was a breakthrough for me. And I know I can feel the difference in the energy in myself, where these two conflicted parts are now on the same team, on the same page, pulling forward for the same results. And the ultimate results, they both wanted the same thing. They both wanted satisfaction and pleasure and have a fun life and a good life. But you know, they went about it both differently, those two different parts of myself. And those two parts then were conflicted. And so I was able to go through this process. Took just a half hour every day for the last week, and this was a really great process. And these are things that we teach in our coaching programs as well. And so that was my breakthrough for last week. But now let's get on then to my focus for this week. And gosh, you know, I'm going to just go ahead, instead of going through all of this at this point, because I've gone on far too long now already. I'm just going to go ahead and just hit on my top 3 things to accomplish this week. The one is complete the sale of the bus. And tomorrow it means I've got to empty it. Wednesday, the buyer's going to come with his money. give me the money. We're going to go to DMV, change the title and license and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to drive it. I got to teach him how to, I'll take him, run him through all the different systems and stuff in the bus, which is a lot of different stuff. And after we do all of that, then got to teach him how to drive it, because it's old school. Not only power steering, it's also standard transmission, but not standard transmission. So even a standard transmission have what's called synchronization plates, syncs, and so that when you put the clutch in and you move to another gear, that the two different gears that are spinning, or the multiple gears that are spinning, they're able to synchronize. And I think it's called a synchronization plate or something like that they have. And these old buses, my 1958, didn't have that. So you have to double clutch, where you hit the clutch and then you take it out of gear, you release the clutch, you then get the RPMs of the engine to a place that's going to match the new gear you're going into. And so then you hit the clutch again, and then you put that in, the shift into the new gear, whether you're shifting up from 1 to 4 or down from 4 to 1. It works both ways. You have to do this double clutching process, and it's really kind of fun to do once you've learned to do it. But most people don't know how to do that anymore. And so this guy that's buying the bus, he's driven standard transmissions before, and stick shifts and all, but never double clutched. And so I'm actually going to take and I'm going to ride in the bus to the island where he's going to take it home with him, and then I'll have a car station where I can come back here to Seattle. And so the way I'm there in the bus with him on the trip and the journey home. We'll practice driving around for about an hour before we hit the journey home for him. But then I'll be there with him for that trip, and so that'll work out really well. But so I need to sort and clear through 7 months of stuff on my desk now. And so here's my desk over here, and an oak roll top desk, and it's just one of those things that when I was here in January, February, I just kind of dumped a lot of stuff on it, and then when I was here in before that, in October, I think it was October, November, or something like that. Again, I just constantly dumping stuff on it, and then as mail comes in for me, because my PO box is here in Seattle where I get all my mail, and Chris just goes through it and puts it on my desk for me. And so stacks on the desk, can get to be kind of out of hand. And Chris is now working from home, and so the dining room table is her workspace for the computer that her company provides her with. And there might be times she'd really prefer to work at the desk, and so I want to have a nice space for that. And so that's the goal for this week then, is to sort and clear through the 7 months of stuff that's on my desk, and then complete the website for Digital Marketing Arsenal. And that's my marketing agency that I'm building. And so I'm building a website, and I've never knew anything about building websites, but I started working on this on Saturday, learning about how to do it. And so I would like to complete at least a basic, the initial starter website for my digital marketing agency, which is called Digital Marketing Arsenal. And I have the URL digitalmarketingarsenal.com. And so that when people pull that up and want to know about my marketing business and my marketing services, they'll be able to do that. And then after I've done that website, I'm going to create the website for Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association. We've never had a website for our nonprofit business. It's just things that we have we have a page where people can get on our email list, but we've never had a website. And so I'm going to start working on getting that created as well. So I'm very excited about those things. But excuse me, for this week then, those are the 3 things that I'm working to accomplish this week. And we'll go through and see if I give myself a pass or fail on those things at the end of, next Monday. And so thank you very much for being here this evening with me and spending this time. It's the longest weekly report and wrap up that I've done, probably because I spent all that time showing my bus off. Thank you for seeing that with me. And I appreciate you a whole lot. Freedom seekers, keep seeking your individual freedom. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by liberating yourself and being selfish about it. So thanks a lot. Enjoy your week. And I'll see you back here next week for next week's wrap-up report.